Hello Charlie, I've done a video here of the restoration of the parts for the bath canopy shower restoration work, which involves the block, the waste, the canopy shower and the feet. So there's quite a lot of bits here, and they've all been renovated and chromed and lots of new bits made, and new rather old bits remachined. This old kit is great because obviously it can be remachined and go again. Right, so first of all, obviously this gorgeous block was a real pain in the backside. I've completely cleaned it up because it was really badly built up with all the various gunging bits and pieces. One thing I did find was the seats here for the taps. They looked okay to start with, but as soon as I cleaned them up I could see they were badly pitted. So what I've done is I've reground them. I couldn't put it in the milling machine because it was too difficult to hold. You can see it's quite a funny shape. I could have held it, but if it slipped it would have ended up damaging it. So what I did was I made this is an air powered angle drill. I made this nylon here, this bush, to fit inside like so. That allowed, and again I made this arbor up here. You can see there's some an abrasive disc on here, so that allowed me to regrind those seats. The diverter seat is badly grooved, but again that's a very difficult one to redo, is that one, and the two mate together very well, so I think we can let that one go. The body jets, I've blanked off the fitting here, and it's got a new washer. Okay. The diverter, the shaft was really badly scored, so I've remachined it down, and the gland nut, I bored it out, filled it in solid, I silver soldered that in place, and then rebored it to suit. So now we've got a parallel shaft. There was also a bush missing, so I've made a nylon bush for that, and the head of that you can see is very nice now. That's been chromed. The base fitting, which passes through here, it was built up of white resin, so I've cleaned all that out, and you can see this disc has been engraved with shower and bath. It's much nicer, and I've also made some very thin silicone gaskets for it. These are the shrouds that go over the tap body. These are the base washers. Again, I've made some silicone washers here. The taps, I'll bring up a picture in a minute, but the jumpers, these are the original ones, were badly bent and distorted, so what I've done is I've remade some new ones, but I'll bring up a picture in the video in a second because they're quite fiddly. I have to make a split collet and a groove shaft for them to stay in place and also to spin. So I've cut some new washers here, and I've machined also out of some solid bar a new washer with a pram nut on there. Okay, so there again, same thing, these shafts were really badly worn. I mean, they had like a spiral groove in them, so I've machined them down, and again the gland nuts, I bored them out, filled them, silver soldered some solid bar in, machined them out, and I fine sanded the inside of them, so we've now got a proper gland nut that fits onto a parallel shaft. These again are the tap bodies. You can see these have cleaned up really well, and the fittings underneath, these have all been cleaned up and blasted as well, and I've got new copper fittings here. The taps, I've made new bolts for these. Again, these have come up really well. Here is the filler. Again, I've made a silicone gasket to go on here. That's come up quite well as that. I had a bit of work to do to that because it was in a bit of a state. So I'll video this once the block's together. You can see it all together because there's a bit of work in assembling this. So that for now is that bit, and I'll stop the video and show you other bits of it as we go along. Okay, back again. Now these are the feet. These were painted with a very thick white paint. So they've been it's been blasted off, they've been polished, and then they've been coppered, nickeled, and then chromed. I've written on the back the position of the feet because it is particular to where it needs to be on the bath. And I've also got you some new bolts. I tried to get some bolts, but it was very difficult trying to get some. These are I did measure them with the thread gauge, and they turned out to be 1/2 inch Whitworth. So I've got some threaded rod, and I have got some nuts and washers. Now I didn't get these zinc plated. They could have been zinc plated, but they were such a tight fit into the base of the bath, it would have been a problem getting these in. So when you fitted them, a bit of paint on them will help to protect them. To get them in, the best thing to do is just tighten one nut against the other, put them in, and then just undo these two nuts, and then do the same with the rest of them. And then when you fit them, just a washer and a nut and nip them up. Obviously don't go too crazy with them because you're talking cast iron. Okay, right, I'll move on to the next bit. Okay, here is the waste and overflow unit. I had quite a number of problems with this. I had to redo an awful lot of it because there was various problems. The tube, if I start here first, the pins here, I've replaced the slider and the stop pin here. They were badly worn, but the main problem was that the bracket was completely the wrong size and shape, and also the spacing between the vertical of the pipe and the wall of the bath was incorrect, which would mean that the seal would not sit properly in the plug hole. So I've had to reform this bracket and also adjust this distance here. So I had to cut this, and literally I put a pin in here and silver soldered it all back together again. So that's all been redone. Here's the nut. When that goes on, there is no room to get a gasket in here because, for one thing, it would be too flexible. So when it's assembled, it needs to have a little bit of silicone on it to seal that up. Okay, the top of the pipe, this was all bashed in, if you remember. So I've actually machined a piece of brass and silver soldered that in, and that's all been re-chromed. The plug hole, again, this was a problem. It was badly marked and it was distorted, so I've remachined that in the lathe to get a good seal. Now the other problem was the slipper waste that was in cast iron was absolutely shot, so I've remade the waste for this. You can see I've remade the bottom of this. There's a new fitting in here, and the retaining nut was in quite a state, so I've reformed that. That fits very nicely onto here now, and I've made a new gasket. So here's the mould, and I made it under vacuum, and there's the gasket, which is now a perfect fit onto the plug hole. Again, this was the problem. The base, obviously the gasket goes on here and it goes that way up on the bottom of the pipe. Again, believe it or not, this was a problem as well, because we've now changed from the slipper waste to the new waste. This dimension here was too long, so I had to reduce that, but I also had to machine this ring here out of a piece of solid plate. That was then silver soldered onto this piece here, which was remachined in the lathe, same as a lot of this was remachined. I've also removed a lot of the sharp edges that were on the original casting. Again, they're just trap points for rubbish that's going to go down the plug hole. So this is now your shallow trap, which will go on to here. Okay, so that's made a really nice unit as that now, and it will operate an awful lot better, more efficiently. You won't be losing so much water either with your new gasket. I'll do a little bit of a video again when this has been assembled. Right, we'll move on to the next bit. Okay, right, we're back again now with some more fittings. These three pieces here are for the porcelain or pottery shower head. I've reformed the washer and the nut because they were a little bit gnarled, and obviously they've been chrome plated. These nuts here are the retaining base nuts for the verticals for the canopy shower. Now I've also made these nylon washers in white just to act as a barrier between the nut and the underneath of the bath, and they just finish it off rather nicely. The smaller ones for the round rear posts have got a cambered edge on one side. That side needs to go underneath the bath, so that's the mating surface of the bath. Again, they've been chrome plated. Now because we're using a thicker glass than basically the plastic that you had before, I'll show you the verticals in a minute that have had to be altered, but it also affected the rear angle iron, that's the brass angle retaining bar that holds the glass in place. What it affected was the spacing of the retaining bracket, and I had to cut this down and silver solder a spacer in and then reshape it all so that you got this extra clearance for the glass, and those have then been chrome plated. Right, I will move on to another bit. Okay, what we have here are the top rails for the canopy shower. Now again, these were a pain because what we had to do was blank off certain portions of it so that the water, when it rose up the vertical rear pillar, it went to the shower head and not filled up the rest of the shower. So for example this, I had to take it apart, cut the pipe in half, blank one half off and then reassemble it, which is quite a fiddly job. The elastic bands, by the way, on here are to stop the nuts sliding down and marking the chrome, if you wondered what they were for. So again, one of these, I'm not sure which one it is, it's possibly this one I think, or this one. One of these again has been split, taken apart, split, blanked off, reassembled, so the water only goes to the shower head and doesn't fill up the rest of the frame. I've made a blanking plug here and various rubber gaskets, which I will illustrate to Craig as to where they go. Okay, so they've all been polished, chrome plated, and again all the nuts on the ends were a little bit marked, so I've reformed those so they look very smart now. Right, on to the next bit. Right, what I've put on the bench here is just one of the angles that retain the glass for the rear round pillar and one of the rear pillars. So these have been cleaned up, polished and chromed, and these are the side rails here that go around the mid part of the shower unit. Again, the bolts have all been chromed. These have been cleaned up and polished because again they were a little bit gnarled. Okay, and I'll get on the bench next one of the square front verticals of the shower. Here we have the front verticals, the square section. You can imagine these were amazing fun to try and polish. I was glad when these were done. Now, because the glass is thicker than the original perspex that was in place, I've had to mill extra clearance out at the bottom of these, which you can't see in the video. and I've also removed those body jet tubes, and I've made some bungs, some threaded bungs here to go into the holes where the fixings were. I've also made 3 brackets for each pillar, and each bracket I've positioned it so it actually goes over those holes. So those have been chrome plated, and of course the bolts have as well, the retaining bolts. I've also got you some sheets of, that was my phone by the way if you heard that, this silicone rubber. The glass is going to be 10mm, and I've made an allowance for 12mm, so there's a 12mm gap to put 10mm glass in. This is 1mm thick, and obviously you really want a barrier between the metalwork and the glass, so you can cut this out when you put the glass in. So that's it really. I'll add to this video once I start assembling various bits and pieces, and you can see them in the finished form. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back again. This is the final bit of the video. Here is the block which is now assembled. You can see the original shroud here. This has been filled with like a weight resin, so we've now got a nice engraved disc shower and bath. The bolts that go in here, I've made all new ones for each of these, and you've got silicone washers which I've cut out to go underneath the large washers that go on top of the roll of the bath. So that's all done now, is that. It was a terrible job to seal up all these joints down here. There's nothing to push against, you can't get a fibrous washer in there or an O-ring, they're just simply a straight thread. And what I found in the end, after messing about for a day and a half, believe it or not, trying to seal these up, is if you use Loctite 55, it's like a very, very strong cord. I can't break it. It's impregnated as well, and it's built up of multi-strands. It looks like it's PTFE with a PTFE grease, and that was fantastic for sealing these. Same with the valves as well. So that was used on those. One thing I've got to do is I've bought this acetyl nylon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a 10mm groove in here for where the glass meets against the bath, because it's going to have to sit on the bath, isn't it, the glass. So I'm going to cut some little blocks with a groove in so that the glass will sit in this acetyl nylon and act as a barrier between the enamelling of the bath and the glass, so you don't get any chipping. But that'll be done later today, will that. Right, well, I hope that was of some interest, and it would be nice to maybe add some pictures to this video of the completed bath and canopy. Thank you for looking. Cheerio now.